New Buddha Way Dharma Talks. Geoff Hunt presents a talk on some aspect of the Buddha's teaching.
Everyone, it's good to see you all, and the sun is shining, which is good. Something to talk about, which is not all sunshine, and that is what has been translated as suffering. The word is Dukkha, D-U-K-K-H-A, and it's difficult to translate, as with most Pali words, but basically we often translate it as suffering. So if you see a reference to suffering in Buddhism, they're using it in a special way, and it covers a number of things such as dissatisfaction, disappointment, not getting what one wants or one expected, anxiety, which has now been medicalized as a medical psychological problem. The Buddha would say that's true, but it's a little more than that. Then there's there's pain. In other words, all the negative aspects of life we could put together as dukkha, or as suffering. So it's no surprise that the Buddha's first noble truth is suffering. And if there weren't any suffering, then we wouldn't need the Buddha's teaching. Younger people will say, if you talk to them, they will say, well, I'm quite happy. I don't know what you're talking about. Well, of course, they are quite happy. They're young and they're getting a lot of support, usually. But we all know that if you're going to live a life, could be anything up to 80 or 90 years, that you get a more balanced view of life. It's, it could tilt in either direction towards more or less a happy life, or a very dissatisfied and unhappy and suffering life. And we've only got to look around to see that you can easily slip from one to the other. Now, the Buddha is interested in that sort of perpetual suffering, which is the suffering of not knowing what's going to happen next, because we don't. We've seen that recently. And there's also the fact that everything is in change, everything's moving, everything's fleeting by, everything's changing, again in ways we don't expect. But we would like things that we are fond of to stay the same, but they don't. So that's the cause of suffering. So the suffering that the Buddha is interested in is a kind of deep background suffering of uncertainty, if you like, and bewilderment. Bewilderment is a good word to describe it, because bewilderment suggests that I'm confused. There are things that I would like to have and like to do and so on, but so often it turns out to be disappointing, or to have certain unpleasant surprises. The bewilderment is a form of mental confusion, and we're not quite. We would like it's premised on an expectation that things will stay as I would like them to be. Now, when that doesn't happen, I feel bewildered, and bewilderment is a large part of human life. Now, the antidote to bewilderment is something solid, something that can help us, that can direct us, that can guide us. Not a dogma, not a faith, not a belief, but where we can use the best that we have as human beings to overcome, or at least soften, dissatisfaction, anxiety, and disappointment. So we've got to understand the causes, or the basis of that dissatisfaction or bewilderment. And that takes us to the second noble truth, which is that, to put it in common English, we want more. We always want more. Just think about it. Just sit back and think, well, like, where are you in your life now? What would you like next? Because there'll always be something that you'd like next. And that leads to craving. It also leads to clinging, in which I cling to those things which I feel give me some solidity and stability. All this is very natural. It's not a bad thing. The Buddha says, this is the way things are. There is no wisdom in trying to change what at bottom cannot be changed. Or at least if we are going to minimize change, that we understand that generally, when we try to change things, even for the good, we might be making them worse. And we see a lot of that in history. We've got lots of plans and projects to do good things. Well, good in not in the moral sense, but good in the sense of having more consumer goods, more skyscraper buildings, more motorways, etc., etc., etc. All of this is supposed to make our life better, but it hasn't, and it won't. So we have to look at a different way of things. Once we understand the cause of our dissatisfaction or anxiety, then we can think about how do we at least soften that suffering. There's a good word, attenuate, which we don't use very much these days. To attenuate is to weaken or soften something. So if we're lay people like we are, leading lives with families and with colleagues and with neighbors and all the rest of it, then obviously we have a lot of apparent obstacles in our way. If you've left your family, put on robes, have a bowl in which other people put food for you to keep you alive, and you're leading the life of a monk or a nun, in a sense, things become easier. But in another sense, they become more difficult because now one's got no excuse for not trying very hard to change one's life and see things differently and more realistically. So the third noble truth is the ending of suffering. And the fourth is, this is the way to do it. And the monks and nuns will be doing it on a more intensive level than we are. But there are so many benefits for us if we understand this. Anxiety, cause of anxiety, end of anxiety, or softening of anxiety, and the way to do that. The way to do that is not, unless absolutely necessary, putting another pill in one's mouth until one is ending up with 3 or 4 different pills. Again, I don't want to mock that because, we feel it's necessary because we don't know what else to do. And sometimes it is absolutely necessary, but the alternative is that you die. Okay, when we talk about the way to end it, the Buddha is talking about this in a special way, and that is that we have the power of understanding so that we can change the way that we do things, and we can do them in a wiser way, which minimizes the suffering. But you have to remember that the Buddha has already shifted the whole aim and objective here. The point is that we're not doing this in order to get more of things, to gain more. We're doing it in order to find satisfaction and wisdom, in particular, compassion for oneself and for others. So in a way, there's a big change that's come about by this teaching. It comes about within you, but it's not a change. It's not necessarily a physical change. It's a change in your understanding of your life. Now, we have a typical consumer commodity approach to our problems, e.g., as I've said, popping pills. Now, again, I'm not mocking that. I'm just saying there's an area to be thought about and considered there. So what we do is divide all our problems up into little packages, give them different names, and then we have different solutions for them. So this is what you can call a piecemeal way of approaching life. But there's always some temporary solution for dealing with every problem, we think. Sometimes the solutions make the problems even worse. The Buddha's approach is completely different. He is not really interested in short-term therapies. His approach is the whole of life. You'll remember that there was a time when insurance brokers used to use this term of the whole of life. You could have a whole of life policy to cover all eventualities, or nearly all eventualities, but you'd have to look at the fine print. And so you had the whole of life covered. Well, we could just hijack that phrase, that the Buddha's approach is the whole of life. You don't expect to go away with a quick fix. You have to bring about a change in your understanding, and you can do it. And the more people that do it, the more peaceful things will be for all of us. Now, what would be the practices or exercises that we can do then? So what is this way of approaching this problem of suffering? Well, it's going to be with your changing your understanding, your outlook, your attitude, but in a systematic, connected, non-selfish way, which seems impossible at first because one's understanding is not so great. But as you see that how it all fits together, you realize that as you understand it, just through the understanding itself, you are changing. You're changing slowly and softly. And it could take months, years before one fully sees, thank goodness I took that path. And when you see the unneeded disasters that befall people, individuals, groups, society at large, you think of, well, why didn't we know this before? Why didn't we apply this before? Well, we are struggling to apply it. And we're all doing that. And we have to live with hope that some difference can be made to human life, because it is quite clear that we cannot go on as we are. We have destroyed other creatures by the thousands. We have destroyed the atmosphere. We have poisoned our food supplies. We have spread diseases by eating animals that we perhaps shouldn't be eating, or being cruel to them, actually, in keeping them. We have caused immense inequality. There are people that have nothing while others are billionaires. It is clear that following that trajectory can only lead to disaster and even more suffering. So we have to be careful what it is that we want, and to want good things, and to want good things for other people. So there must be a way, and the Buddha found this way, he says, and I would agree with it, to soften our anxieties, soften our greed, soften our hatred, and that is called meditation, which I always think has 3 limbs: mindfulness, concentration, and softening of the heart, the softening of one's attitude, identifying with others. That is compassion. Now, you're also fortunate that if you're approaching things through this path, you have the support of other people who are also doing so. So we can compare notes, we can have discussions, we can support each other when unfortunate things happen in life. We have somebody at the moment who has a terminal illness, and we have had that happened in the past. And it's great to be able to know that there is some support there with the people who understand you and care about you. So we could add to our list of ways of practicing and exercising to soften anxiety with support by the Sangha. Now, by the Sangha, we've actually kidnapped a monastic word, because Sangha means community, but its original meaning was the monastic community. That's the monks and nuns, that they were the Sangha. Well, in modern usage, now we've come to expand the notion of Sangha, that where you have a Buddhist community of any sort, whether it's lay or monastic, we call it a Sangha. So New Buddha Way is a Sangha. It's a small community with fuzzy edges, which is fine. It's not a project. It's not a money-making exercise. It's about just getting this teaching out there and supporting each other in doing that, but not in a dogmatic way. Hopefully, and people need to be corrected, myself included. So how to soften anxiety? Well, there's mindfulness. What is mindfulness essentially? It's essentially knowing what it is that your mind is doing or not doing, getting to know the tendencies that exist in one's own mind. You can spend the whole day with all sorts of things fleeting through your mind, changing every moment, and never for one moment actually noticing or acknowledging what it is that's going through one's mind. So we're pushing things up a level and recognizing or knowing what it is that we know. So we know what we know. What we know is what we think we know, is what we are doing all the time, thinking. But there's a higher level of knowing, and that is when we know what it is that we know, what we think we know. So mindfulness is a practice of a kind of self-awareness. That what is it that's popped up in my mind? And then, of course, one can evaluate it. As I've said before, Buddhism is not against judgment. It is against wrongful judgment. It is in favor of one's judging oneself in a compassionate, fruitful way. Otherwise, how am I going to move forward? I have to be able to say, that anger or irritation was arising in my mind again, and I didn't feel good at that time, so why did I allow it to arise? That's judgmental. But it's good, it's productive judgment. Okay? So there's a misunderstanding out there that somehow Buddhists are against all judgment. It's silly to think that. Now let's just say it's mistaken, especially in the early stages. So we've got mindfulness, which is a definite, clear exercise, but you need to sustain it. You can't go on an eight-week course and think, right, I've got that, because it doesn't fit on the shelf with other kinds of courses, which were to do with various varieties of counseling or psychotherapy or taking medications. You could pile them all up on the shelf and think, which one shall I take today? But that's not mindfulness. Mindfulness is that once you've got what it is that you're supposed to be doing, then you have to try to persevere with doing it. So it requires some endurance. But when you see the benefits, then you'll think, right, that is a good way to go. When you start feeling more solid, more stable, less given to irritation and anger, less disappointment, less enjoyment of life and the wonderful things around you, then you'll think, yes, this actually works. It's just that it takes time. And the best way to do it is in a Sangha, is with others. Because you will find difficulties in doing mindfulness, but things will improve as you go along. Concentration, being able to meditate and keep the mind focused in one area or one object in order to bring about tranquility. It's a good place to start. Developing compassion, that is identifying yourself with other people. In a way, we can identify ourselves even with the whole entire human race. It doesn't mean that you've suddenly become weird and arrogant. It's that you understand that, you are actually part and parcel of something very large, called the human race, and that we have a lot in common, and our mistakes and misunderstandings are in common, but our potential and our hope is in common. So compassion is very important, a very important part of the Buddha's teaching. Now I want to, on a happy note, a supportive note, quote something from the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, who is Vietnamese Zen teacher, still alive, but in his 90s and very poorly now. And he wrote this: "The energies of the Sangha and mindfulness trainings are protecting and helping me not to make mistakes or be swept along in darkness by unwholesome seeds, such as greed and hatred. With kind spiritual friends, I am on the path of goodness, illuminated by the light of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas are people in training to be a Buddha. Although seeds of suffering are still in me," which is why I'm doing the exercises, "in the form of afflictions and habit energies," so I develop habits of doing things, the habit of getting angry over certain things, right? Well, when I'm aware of that, I have started to train it or stop its growth the moment that I'm able to acknowledge it. Habit energies. Mindfulness is also there, helping me touch what is most wonderful within and around me. I develop my attention and mindfulness, I will see the world in a better place. So I make many of these points in my own book, which went to a lot of trouble to get what I've taught over the last 20 years into one book. So you can always refer to it if you're interested. I'm not saying you shouldn't read other books. It's called The Buddha's Path of Peace. You'll see Geoff Hunt if you go on Amazon. And if you can't afford it, let me know and we'll see what we can do. Okay, over to Lynn. Thank you very much for listening.
New Buddha Way lets go of East and West and starts afresh in the life we have now. For more information, visit www.newbuddhaway.org.